Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Simply Tech Live here at the Microsoft Technology Center. How are you guys doing today?
Good. How many episodes do we have so far?
This is the third one, and
Wow.
we have a bunch scheduled. If this is your first time tuning in, Simply Tech Live is a library of discussions with technologists and business leaders about the evolving landscape of technology. So we're going to have discussions ranging from the HoloLens, which we still need to schedule. Misty, all the way to AI and ML running in our hyperscale cloud, Azure. So I'm your co-host, Derek Russell. I am a specialist on the data and AI team here in the West US region at Microsoft. My other co-host?
That's a lengthy title, but all right. Ali Mazaheri, I'm the MTC director in Irvine, and today we have a special guest. Kevin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Kevin Orbaker. I am the data and AI architect alongside Ali here, so I work with him and this team that is gathered here with us.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show. So we were initially going to do a different demo today or showcase today. We were going to do something around custom vision and AI and what we're doing in the big ag and livestock industry. But because of all of the commotion around hand sanitization, we thought that we should showcase what a connected hand sanitization device should look like.
Tongue twister.
Yeah, so we're going to be focusing on this here. What is this thing? Why are we standing in front of this? And why did we choose this as a demo in the
Yeah,
MTC?
before we get into detail, first of all, good luck going and finding hand sanitizers at Target or any other. So there's going to be a black market for this. Everybody coming here and using the system. But getting back to your question, so as we discussed in the previous shows, here at the MTC, it's all about experience selling. So we work with a lot of customers, in this case like Gojo, that Kevin is going to talk about it, which by the way, there's going to be a shout out to the Detroit MTC, Stacy, who enabled all the centers to have this demo. What we do is to bring all these experiences as we start working with the customers like Gojo, and I think our first episode was with Augment and the Nespresso machine.
Yep.
To put this on display, so as you walk into the center, it's not about PowerPoint presentation or talking points. It's really about experiencing it and see it firsthand. So Gojo was one of the first scenarios and experiences that we rolled out to all the MTCs, and to any locations that you go across the US, you're going to see a Gojo machine, and that's something that is near and near to everybody's, especially these days as you brought it up.
So when we talk about quantifying behavior, so you can augment behavior, we'll go back to that in a little bit. The CDC claims that hand washing reduces incidence of common ailments by nearly 60% in some cases. So if you're in a hospital facility and you are somehow incented to sanitize your hands, this could be very good for the spread of disease, or very bad for the spread of disease, however you want to put it. What's going on with this solution? Can you talk about the solution? Can you talk about what it is, why it's important for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So
By the way, let me just use it.
Before you touch
Yeah, I
it.
know. I mean,
And it's 1 meter now, right? Is it like
Yeah.
that's the new guidance?
Yeah, it's going to go up.
We'll check that. So the solution is actually pretty simple. I mean, as you mentioned, 60% of infectious diseases can be reduced simply by washing your hands, purifying your hands. There's just some other numbers that go along with that. In healthcare specifically, it was in 2011 there was a report that indicated that in hospitals there were about 760,000 communicable diseases or infections that were acquired in the hospital. And by simply purifying or washing your hands, that 60% reduction can be done. With those 760,000, there are actually 78,000 deaths that year alone by just standard common diseases that are captured this way. As such, Gojo, the parent company for Purell, decided maybe there's a better way, or maybe there's a way to find what they called opportunities to sanitize. So this particular use case, they actually started that back in 2011, believe it or not. And their first stab at it was not very functional. It had some issues, some stability issues. The data that it was creating really wasn't useful. So they came to the MTCs. They said, listen, we tried to do this thing called SmartLink, it wasn't really great, but we still think our idea is good. So they worked with Microsoft and the MTCs to kind of come up with a better way to do SmartLink. So SmartLink's job is actually a couple of things. What you're seeing here is our Azure IoT Sphere chip. This is a developer board, so the chip itself is just right there, but the board itself is what we use to do development. But they use the Azure IoT Sphere chip to connect this device to our Azure IoT services. On top of that, they also have an IR. We don't have it here, but they have an IR sensor that checks as people walk by a sanitization.
IR meaning infrared.
Yes, infrared sensor
Okay.
to know when a human is walking by it. And they consider that an opportunity. Because if you're walking by it, it's an opportunity to sterilize. So that whole process that they went through was really taking a look at how they could better track people that were going by it and how they could better track whether or not it was being used. And this was all done with our IoT services in the back end.
Got it. And so can you talk about what Azure Sphere actually is? You said it's an MCU.
So Azure Sphere is what's called a microcontroller. You can find them like with Arduinos. A lot of different companies make them. You can find them embedded in everything from your refrigerator to your toaster. Even if they're not technically, let's say, internet connected, there's still a microcontroller in there. What makes Azure Sphere very unique is that it is a microcontroller that has networking communication built in, secure networking communication, secure, as well as a Cortex-A processor, which allows it to actually host a microkernel operating system. In this case, Microsoft has put a microkernel of Linux on it, and that Linux support from Microsoft will be for 10 plus years. So think of it as you will. Today there might be IoT devices out there that are microcontroller based, and they might be connected. But there's no way to update the security. There's no way to actually say, oh, there's a new threat in the world, because technology changes. Most microcontrollers cannot. Once they're fixed, they're put on the device, they're put on the field, they're locked in. Yeah, absolutely. In 2016, there was an attack on the East Coast of the United States. Approximately 100,000 connected IoT devices were compromised by these attackers on one day. All 100,000 of them were then harnessed to do a denial of service attack on the internet in general, and it brought down the entire East Coast of the United States for an entire day. Now, the problem with that was there was no way to notice that they were being attacked because the devices themselves didn't know. The microcontroller itself is kind of, we'll call it just incapable of understanding what's happening outside of it. And number two, there was no way to push any updates. There's zero way because the microcontroller itself is burned as it's done. Once it's burnt, it's done. The only way to update it is to replace the entire chip. In this particular case with Azure Sphere, however, because we have that Cortex-A processor, the ability to actually update microcontroller software on side of it, from a customer perspective, not only is it secure communication out of the box, and not only is it communicating to our services without any additional support or need, but we can also support it from a security perspective for the lifetime of the processor. So Azure Sphere itself is very unique within the microcontroller. Whether you're using it to build a completely new device, for instance, Gojo actually put a Sphere chip inside of their devices. Ours is obviously external for demo purposes. But we also have a version of Sphere that can retrofit existing hardware called Azure Sphere Guardian. So imagine, if you will, you're in a manufacturing organization or something like that where you might have very big devices, robotic arms, conveyor belts, systems that are building things, and they might have IoT data but aren't internet connected. You can actually use Azure Sphere with Guardian to put that in front of it, still be able to get access to that data in real time to our Azure IoT services, and still ensuring that it's secure, and you're kind of retrofitting it on existing legacy hardware. So it's a very good
the
solution.
Nespresso that we did, that's a good scenario for using the Guardian. And I believe you're going to share the case study for Gojo, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I just, and I'll put the case study into the comments in the live broadcast. And if you have any comments, you want to give us some emotional support, you have some questions, this is a live broadcast. I'm actually checking the feed now. I'm not on Facebook. So please come in and comment. But PRL SmartLink, they did this with a large health organization, and they saw an 82% increase over the baseline in hand sanitization compliance. So that's like an 18-month period. So imagine an 82% increase over that baseline when the spread of infectious diseases are caused by not washing your hands.
Yep.
So it's a huge use case. And then going back to connected devices, our friend Dean Bethke, who is an IoT specialist on the West US side, he likes to say IoT is about making dumb things smart and smart things smarter. So this is a dumb machine, but we're making it smart with the IoT Azure Sphere. So what is this?
Yeah, so this is actually the portal for SmartLink that Purell created. This is a very simple, there's other dashboards here, but this basic one kind of identifies the number of opportunities that people could sanitize, and then tracking the actual quantity of those opportunities, so the ratio of opportunity to actual sanitization unit. So it's a very simple dashboard, but it's very purposeful, and it actually gets the data. And this is real time as well. So as somebody goes by here, you can monitor that or see a report on that, be able to ensure that throughout the day, so you're not waiting till, let's say, the end of the month to get a report. You can actually see it throughout the day and live during the, maybe it's a shift on the floor.
And I think that's one right now is the Irvine, right?
Yes, we're looking at Irvine right now.
Different locations.
Yeah, each one of the locations within all the MTCs has the ability to go up there, hit the button, so to speak, and then go over here and check out the data. Yeah.
In fact, we have a competition, so you know which center is using it the most.
Who's using it?
Who's got the cleanest hand? Maybe.
They need to have that in the hospital. But so, I mean, you're talking about the full life cycle of data and AI. You're talking about having a dumb device. You're talking about ingestion in real time, not just batch. You're talking about ingestion, you're talking about storage.
Yeah.
You're talking about reasoning through it with AI and ML for predictive behaviors so you can augment behaviors as well as diagnose them. And then you're also talking about distributing it to, this is a web app.
Yep.
Via Power BI, which is a visualization tool.
Power BI can be used as well, yep.
So entire life cycle of the data journey while you're also helping people, stop the spread of infectious
All powered
disease.
by Azure.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's that?
Yeah, so behind Ali here, we actually have another solution around IoT. It's actually a bit more, let's say, industry specific. That's industrial IoT. We refer to it quite often as IIoT. And industrial IoT itself is a unique beast in that your standard IoT, let's say controlling your lights in your house or your thermostat in your house, right?
Do we have a shot of that? You might want to.
I don't know. Am I blocking?
So, so the device, this wall itself is actually highlighting a number of industrial IoT devices.
Okay.
So within the kind of the scope of what Azure supports, our IoT services, right? Not only can we support maybe a more conventional device, whether it's in your home or within an organization, but think of the manufacturing floor, think of the robotic arms, think of the controllers and the PLC devices. Those things not only need to talk to the cloud and be able to provide IoT data there, but they also need to talk to themselves. So if you have something, I use actually like self-driving cars as a good example. Some of the modern self-driving cars can generate up to 60 gigabytes of data a second. Now, I love Azure, right? But if you have a remotely connected car, over Wi-Fi or 5G or even 5G, you're not going to be able to shove 60 gigabytes of data a second to any network. So a lot of that has to be the devices need to communicate themselves. A wheel needs to know what the motor is doing, and the motor needs to know what the suspension is doing, and the cameras need to tell the whole thing how to work together, and they communicate together that way as a unit. But then that data goes up to the cloud to do new machine learning models to be able to do better prediction on whether or not it needs to slam on the brake before it. So imagine, if you will, you have all these industrial controllers. They need to communicate to each other, but they also need to go to the cloud. So when they communicate in the industrial IoT standard. This wall is highlighting just that, the fact that our Azure IoT services not only support these, but they also support industrial standards as well.
And that's part of Microsoft's strategy. Is everything needs to work in the cloud, and needs to work on the edge as well.
Yes.
So we're a true hybrid business, and that's just because of the way that we've managed our legacy side of the business on premises, as well as all the investments and progressiveness we have in our cloud-based technologies, right?
Yeah,
I'm seeing that every single day. So Ali, you guys are doing hackathons here at the Microsoft Technology Center. You got a bunch of cool equipment. I see customers coming in all the time. I see them walking around here. Like, what are some of these hackathons? And you've been doing these a lot. How are these empowering customers? Have you seen a shift?
There's a huge shift.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been at the MTC for almost 8-9 years now. We used to do a lot of briefing and design session. Now customers, they actually want to have their hands on the technology and the devices and the tools. In fact, recently, Kevin and I, we work with the Augment through the partnership that we have. And we managed to get devices like 20 board per each MTC, meaning that if you are interested to come and get your hands on Azure Sphere for your own product or your own projects, you can come to the MTC, we give you the board, and Kevin and the team, they can work with you to build something real, and you guys can test it against your cloud subscription or whatever that you want. So getting back to your question, is really about like not only generating the data, but also how to leverage it. And I think this is where we can showcase the end-to-end solution and story and how they can connect all of these pieces together.
And we have this perspective on the components that are on Azure, hardware have components. We also have some SaaS applications with things like IoT Central.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
So tell us, Kevin, you're talking about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Just current trends, things that you think people that care more about. We had a utility customer in here yesterday.
Yep.
What do folks care about when it comes to connecting devices and it comes to ingesting data real time, skill sets, things that kind of you think about when you're coming to work every day?
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, I should say, come in and they actually think that there's a lot of complexity to IoT, and there is. I'm not going to lie, right? There's a lot that happens with IoT. However, what I feel, or the way that the Microsoft platform itself is working today, is that we've removed a lot of the complexity. We've made a lot of the complex simple, kind of that concept of making dumb devices smart and smart devices smarter. Well, we've done the same thing to actually use our services to be able to get devices, whether they be legacy or net new, or they're building for the future, or they're planning for the future, and then connect it. Now, the great thing about that IoT data, once you connect it, is that the platform we have, as you mentioned, can scale limitlessly.
Yep.
I mean, imagine, it's one thing to have a little Purell thing, or even, we have 15 MTCs in the US, 15 of these things doing this kind of thing one at a time. But in hospitals, they have hundreds of thousands of these around the US, and all of them are communicating in real time, potentially doing millions of updates a day, right? And having the scale to do that is important. That's something you really can't do on-prem anymore. That's where the cloud really becomes a very valuable asset, especially if you want to make sure that it's available full-time, because you want to have high availability, disaster recovery, and then you want to be able to have a scalable system on the back end to take that data in. From the platform perspective, once you get the data, data for the sake of data, I'm a data guy, right? So data for the sake of data is kind of useless. Yes, we can collect billions of points of data a day, but what good is it going to do if we can't do anything with it? So that takes it to the next level, which is having those services. You mentioned like Power BI, which is great for visualization. But what about taking that data and doing predictive models, predictive analytics? When is the heaviest utilization time for that? Maybe we can predict that per location. Maybe it's when is the device going to fail? We have predictive maintenance is huge within every industry. Especially robotic arms or something that a company is going to get a lot of value, or let's say lose money, should that go down. We had an energy company in here that, those windmills, I don't know, at least here on the West Coast, we have windmills.
In Texas too. And in
China. We had one of those companies come into the MTC for a session, and they indicated that if they have to go out to a windmill that breaks unexpectedly, they lose up to $100,000 a day. So, that's a huge loss for them. So being able to predict maintenance, be able to know when a device, or when, in this case, a windmill is not going to be, it has a maintenance window, let's say, that they can go and fix that before it breaks down. They said that that's a $10,000 fixed, typically. It saves them, $90,000 in losses per day. Now that's assuming they fix it in one day, right? Typically they can't. So they could lose, millions of dollars just being unable to do predictive maintenance. So taking the data from something like this, or anything they have, bringing that in, and then doing machine learning and analytics, and then having the store to actually store billions of points of and to be able to weed through that, right? All of those are values they need, data they need to store, actions they need to take on it, and then obviously visualization with Power BI and other services as well.
Yeah.
But all of that drives this IoT ecosystem. It's not just the device and getting the data in.
Add that to medical devices, like, if you can predict, let's say, my son's diabetes sensor ahead of time, it can literally save lives, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, and I like how we're tying this back. So Sumit, he said, "Go team!" Very relevant story given the time. He's our cheerleader. So he's cheerleading us.
We miss you, Sumit.
Yeah, we miss you, man. So let's kind of throttle back off the technology just a little bit. We only have a couple minutes left. Would love to talk about one of the initiatives that I saw you post about on LinkedIn the other day, like the World Down Syndrome Day.
Yep.
Can you talk about that? Can you talk about lots of socks? Hashtag lots of socks.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And then I would love to hear from Ali a couple comments around the challenges that you may incur when you're a parent and you have children that have diseases or impairments or things that they have to struggle with.
Sure, yeah. So lots of socks is well, let me take a step back. So the UN has declared that March 21st, is World Down Syndrome Day. Now, there's a significant number in 321, just so you know. The 21st chromosome of the human body, in the case of a Down syndrome individual, has 3 chromosomes instead of a pair. Everybody else has normal pairs. The 21st chromosome has 3, aka 321. So as part of raising awareness for Down syndrome, they declared that March 21st would be World Down Syndrome Day. Part of that kind of awareness process is saying, listen, let's raise awareness by wearing crazy socks. And you don't have to buy any specific
We
socks.
all like crazy socks.
Yeah,
Right?
you can wear mismatched socks, right? Or one sock, no sock, right? Some people say wear 3 socks, or one foot with one sock, wear another sock that matches, and then just pull one half up on a third sock because it's, for 3 chromosomes. So it's really a day to raise awareness for Down syndrome. That's a community, believe it or not, it is the #1 chromosomal disorder on the planet. 1 in every 100 children are born with Down syndrome. So, 1,000. 1,000 children. So, that's a huge number around the globe. There are more Down syndrome chromosomal disorders than any other chromosome on the planet. So it's just a day to raise awareness. And I'd encourage everybody to go ahead and wear those crazy socks on that day. And if somebody asks, hey, your socks don't match, you can explain to them exactly why. And again, just kind of raise that awareness. Absolutely.
And then some things that you guys have learned through the challenges of helping your
I
kids.
think the biggest word that comes to mind is empathy.
Yeah.
And this is where for me personally, every time I face a challenge, whether it's at work or outside or any kind of day-to-day task that anybody wants to do as an errand, you think about how the kids or people with those disability, they can go through day in, day out, and they still manage to accomplish a lot of things. It gives you the sense of yes, let's do better, let's use technology in a better way to help others. And this is one thing that we, especially at Microsoft, and I'm sure other places, they kind of realize that on a day in, day out.
How about yourself?
Yeah, empathy for sure. One of the challenges with any disability or special need is, a lot of times, now, as I mentioned, my son has Down syndrome. And so, it's, in most cases, it's fairly obvious that he has Down syndrome. In Ali's son's case, you would look at him and have no idea that he has any quote-unquote disability or anything that would cause a red flag. So part of empathy is understanding that even though somebody may look normal or maybe may have shown no obvious signs, it doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't struggling or having something to deal with. In the case of my son specifically, there's a lot of challenges. I won't sugarcoat it.
And quickly, Thomas Duclos, he's on the Azure Stack Edge team. He left a message that says his son has Down syndrome. So nice add-on on the discussion. So that's really cool.
Thanks
Thomas.
I'll just kind of lead with some or stop my portion with kind of leading into some of the things that Microsoft has given for the special needs community. You know, we have Seeing AI app, which allows blind people to actually see the world around them, or those maybe with vision impairments. Great, great app. It's free. It's on the iOS App Store. I'd go download it if you have any friend, family member, or yourself that's struggling with some vision loss. We also have, in the case of our Swift key, you know, it's the keyboard, the swipe keyboard feature that you can download. That same group made a thing called Swift key. Oh shoot, I'm gonna forget the name of it. Swift key icons or Swift. I'll send the link.
Look it up.
We'll get you a link. But it's a way for people that may have communication disabilities. Like my son actually can't talk. Now that's not the same for all Down syndrome individuals, but my son just can't talk. So having an application that allows them to actually build a sentence and then have it talk for them in a very simple way, Microsoft made that available to the community for free.
Yeah,
right, it's
cool.
a huge,
Very
huge,
cool.
and we'll provide links to the app as well as some videos on how it's used in both education as well as personal lives. It's a very, very powerful solution. And there are others out there that we're deploying every day. Microsoft Research, you mentioned Farbeats. There's other things around that, around helping rural farmers. So there's a lot that we're doing to help those communities to be able to take advantage of technology to better their lives.
And just like double clicking just a little bit, you know, just based on Thomas's comment, you know, what is some advice that you can give to parents, new parents, current parents? I see you every single day. You bring the best personality. You talk about Disneyland. You talk about cars. You talk about your family, and you know it must be so tough. But you bring yourself 110% to your career every single day. So does Ali. Just got some quick advice. Just one piece of advice you think.
That's a tough one. You put me on the spot there. Listen, everybody processes things differently. Like that's a fact. For me personally, right? You know, you can't change the hands you're dealt, but you can deal with the deal you've been given, right?
Yeah.
And for me personally, I've chosen to really make that a part of my life that's actually my story, right? And sharing that story, whether it's directly related to somebody like Thomas or indirectly, like somebody that may not understand the struggle, but is actually can learn empathy from that, right? Sometimes that's part of that power as well. For me personally, I enjoy talking about technology so much that's the passion I have. But when I go home, I am 100% dedicated to that boy, right? And whether it be taking him to Disneyland or you know he recently started baseball, which is a really cool feat for us, quite fun actually. But you know those are the things that kind of enhance that opportunity. To learn from him, I probably learn more from him than he has learned from me, and I would say that that's my biggest takeaway from that life, working with him, and then using that to share back to my customers.
That's really cool. Thank you for that, Kevin. So we're going to end here. Ways that folks can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can get a hold of me obviously on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is Kevin Orbaker, I think, Kevin.Orbaker.
And if you don't respond, they can just ping your boss.
Yeah, absolutely. And trust me, he'll make sure I respond. You can follow me on Twitter at MSFTKevino. And then obviously here in the MTCs, I'm Tiki Kev on GitHub. So that's another whole story about my Tiki passion.
Yeah, we should have a special program.
We should do a whole day on just Tiki.
Yeah.
I would love that. Come in my Hawaiian shirt that time.
That's awesome. Well, hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to comment, or if you want to come on the show with us, have some fun, you can do that too. Send us a message, and
if you have some IoT device you want to show off, let's do it.
Bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, thanks a lot.
Cheers.